right. Well, we got 2 minutes to go, so let's see. All right. Oh, we got 1 minute to go. Hi, my name is Anand Tobo. I hope this is working. It says it's working, so I think it's working. You should be able to see me kind of waving around. There is a latency of around between 20 seconds to 40 seconds between my speaking and you hearing it. So I'll see a message immediately, but it'll take me like up to a minute to respond to a message that I see, because that's how it is. So, tell me how I sound. Good God. I can hear myself and it sounds so weird. But that's an artifact of recording devices, and we'll talk about that a bit. Hello, Nirali. Cute picture. I like mine better. Alright, we are officially on. Awesome. So you all can see me chatting over here in my own window. So, basics of sound and mixing. Excellent. So you can see the microphone in front of my face. It's very cool sort of thing. It's a very basic microphone, and we'll talk about how we perceive sound now. So, what is sound? That's, very sort of basic. It feels so weird. This is my first time doing something live, and there's just a computer screen in front of me. I'm talking to myself. Okay, so I'm talking to you guys. What is sound? If you can hear the sounds in the background behind me, there's obviously a fan, and there's the boys in my hostel you hear in the background. But if none of those were all there, if we had a proper workshop in real life, I'd turn off everything and I'd say wait for 5 seconds. So let's count to 5 with absolutely nothing as much as possible. If you can turn off the fan, great, for like 5 seconds just to hear nothing. Starting now. Alright, and that's the sound of nothing, hopefully, if you were able to turn off anything. When there is nothing happening, you have air which is not moving. Air is just staying there in one place, and there's no breeze, there's no nothing, because sound is essentially a motion of the air, but it's not motion like you think of the breeze. Breeze makes sound, breeze is not a sound. Sound is variations in pressure. So when I move my hand up and down like this, I'm making a sound that you can't hear. I'm making a sound. You just can't hear it because your ears are not built for it. I'm pushing the air, so the air below my hand is getting squeezed and the air above my hand is is expanding as such. There's not much use for it. That's just really basic science you learn in school. But the thing about it is it's what is called low frequency. It's really, really slow. The maximum a human could probably move their hand is maybe 5 times a second if you go like really, really fast, and that's a sound frequency that I'm making with my hand. But you can't hear it because we don't need to. You can feel sounds like that if you have a powerful enough speaker, and that's what big old bass speakers and all are there for. Big shows, you get sub bass speakers for stuff that you can't hear, but you can feel it. And that's where a lot of our experience of bass comes from, is what we feel, not what we actually hear with our ears. If we learn a bit about how our ears perceive sound, there's a curve called, let me look it up. So that's the Fletcher Munson curve. It's called the Fletcher-Munson curve, and it was people in the early days of sound recording went and recorded. They tried to do scientific experiments on how humans perceive sound, and this is what they came up with after extensive testing. It's called the equal loudness contour, and it's really weird for people who don't know much about graphs. But what it means, essentially, that red line, each of those red lines, let's say they started playing a sound. That's a sound. If I change the pitch of the sound, it goes like I can't make a lot of sounds with my mouth, but every time you change the pitch, the sound of the every time you change the sound, your ear perceives it in a slightly different way. So they did that testing and they found that sounds that are low frequency have to be boosted up by a lot, as you can see, uh, just to hear them at the same volume that as, let's say, our voices. So if you were playing a bass guitar just by itself and you wanted to hear it as loud as your speaking voice is, or as loud as someone is speaking to you, you'd have to boost it. You'd have to raise the volume that much to hear it and perceive it at the same volume. That's what the equal loudness contour means. So it's kind of interesting. So there's a neat little dip in the diagram here, which is where our ears are the most sensitive. So you actually usually have to decrease the volume for these particular frequencies, otherwise it's very shrill and very annoying. So it's like which makes sense because this is where most of our voices live, in this range. So you drop the frequency because our ears are already sensitive to it, and then again for super high frequencies you have to raise the volume. That's what this is a very interesting thing about how we perceive sound. So I hope some of y'all got the message I sent on the group, which is download this software called Reaper. And is it mine is stuck? Okay, so I'm going to just close this and restart it. It's a recording software called a digital audio workstation, and I'm going to use it just for a bit of presenting on what it is. So I also wanted to talk about how sound frequencies work, why you have like massive bass speakers, why you have really small speakers up on the top and all. So the interesting thing about low frequency is that it spreads out. So if, as you saw me shaking my hand, the air just spreads out. It's just like if something heavy is pushing the air just moves away and it moves outwards. But if I had like a speaker playing the sound of a bird, for example, I could turn it. Birds are chirpy like high frequency sounds, and they that sound tends to go where it's aimed. So that's an interesting thing as to a low frequency sound spread out and high frequency sounds tend to go straight. So when you mix the two together, you need, and let's say I'm standing really far away from the stage, you could aim a high frequency speaker at me and I'll hear it, but if I walk to the side, I'll hear it slightly less, which is why you'll see these array of small speakers aiming at everyone so that everyone hears the sound. Whereas if you go to a stage and they just need a small set of really big bass speakers, because the bass just spreads out to everyone. So that's an interesting thing, is that you keep the bass anywhere and it'll spread out, but you have to aim the high frequency sounds at people. So that's one of the reasons why the arrangement works. This may be a bit confusing. Why is Reaper not starting? All right. The second thing I wanted to talk about was hold on. I have it all written down somewhat. So I have to make sure I follow my ideas and not get lost. Yes. Okay. So that's part of how we interpret sound. We are less sensitive to low frequency sound, which is one of the reasons that we have to boost bass so much. Sorry, it took me so long to say that. One of the reasons we have to boost the bass so much, right? All right, is that we perceive it less, and also because it spreads out. So that's why people like to boost the bass. It sounds better, and then it just ends up getting too loud. If you think about it, and something is wrong with my software. It's not loading and I don't know why, because it was working earlier. So I'll give it one more try and I'll just keep talking for a bit. So I was also going to talk about the different types of connectors. That's something that's really important, and I found that that people tend to forget about how stuff is connected. So some of y'all may be guitarists. Y'all will be familiar with these guitar plugs, which which people like to use. This is known as this one. Sorry, it's this one. This plug on its own actually costs $150 because it's a nice high quality one. You can see there's a tip and a sleeve, metal contact, and the two are separated so that you can send a single signal along it. It's called TS, tip sleeve, and one of the sister to that is the tip ring sleeve, which you'll recognize as a stereo connector or a larger version of your headphone connector. Usually there's a tip, a ring, and a sleeve, which is known as TRS. And all this really means is that is the number of single signals you can send around. One of the reasons I mentioned earlier about air being still is we would take something as a reference point. So when you're recording a signal, when you're measuring electricity, when you're saying how bright it is, you're saying it's bright in reference to something, or it's loud in reference to something, which is your 0 point. So your 0 point in this one of these connections on any connector is your 0 point, and the other is the signal that you're sending. So a a two contact device like this, a tip and a sleeve. Usually the reference point is the sleeve, and your signal is sent along the tip. And with a stereo connector, you have this reference signal sent along the ground, the signal sent along the sleeve, and you have the ring for an extra signal, so you have your left and right channel. Although I use that for something slightly different known as balanced audio, which is kind of interesting. So I'm going to do something on my computer, and I'm going to talk about why mic cables, which I'm going to demonstrate here. All right. So this is a mic cable. Some of you all may recognize it who have been on stage. It's called XLR. I hope it's coming through clearly. 1 second. There we go. Let me adjust. All right. Oh yeah, okay, that's good. So this is a mic cable. All right, sorry, I couldn't see myself over here. So, and it's called an XLR. I don't know what that stands for. I don't think anyone does. But it has 3 contacts: one for the reference signal, and one for its little one for its reference signal, one for the actual signal, and one for its noise removal. It does some really cool mathematical trick for adding and removing noise. For removing noise over long cables. One of the reasons you use a mic cable for stages and for whatnot is it's just something incredibly simple. I'm going to explain it really quick now because it's something that just blows my mind every time I think about it. There's an adage known as less is more, and this is one of the greatest examples of that. It's so utterly simple. I'll show it really quickly. Your reference signal. Oh, sorry, that's really bad. Go back. Go to. What in the heck? All right, here we go. So your reference signal is a flat line, like so. So there's no signal being sent along that line. When you record an audio, you are getting. Oh, this is my voice. Let's say pretend that's my voice. So that's what's sent along one. You have your reference signal, and you have a signal being sent. Your actual audio signal being sent on top of that. What happens is when you start, let's say over here, so your audio starts over here at the start of your cable, and by the time it reaches the end of the cable, it's a little bit noisy like that. That's noise added on top of the signal, and you don't want that noise. So how would you remove it? When it's just a 2 connector cable, you can't remove it. It's just kind of baked together, and you just can't remove it. So what they do is a really interesting and convenient thing. Here we go. No, I can't do that. Okay, so what they do is it's simply copied upside down on the extra wire. So I'm doing a very bad example here. Oh, wait, let me try that again. Hold on. Ooh, there we go. Yeah, there we go. So I'll just do a slightly better this thing. This is something that I think everyone should understand because it's I've seen a lot of people who just use any cable for any purpose, and I'm like, there's a reason that they use these cables for a specific purpose. So this is your audio signal. Yes, I'm drawing this with my mouse, so this is your reference signal, and on the 3rd wire of the audio cable, they send the same signal flipped exactly upside down. Yeah, that's close enough. All right. The benefit of this is that because the wires are stuck together in the cable, by the time it reaches the other side, the input, you've got noise on this cable. Say that's a bump of noise, and I don't want to hear that. The thing is, because the wires are so close together, the bump appears on upside down on the other signal. All right. So when you add these 2 signals together, you'll actually get sort of nothing if you keep them the way they are. But the magic is that you take it up at the other end, and you have your original audio signal here. You have your copied audio signal here, and with the noise, that noise is there, and now it's upside down and it just cancels itself out. It's super amazing. It's so simple if you think about it. So simple, just by flipping, just pure math, flipping things -1 upside down and flipping them the right side up. So it just blows my mind, everything, and I think everyone should really appreciate the engineering that goes into sound. So that's covered. Now let's see, where is it? Yes. Something that people don't tend to understand with when they use microphones, like say the one that I'm using, is what's known as its polar pattern or sensitivity pattern is one thing that's. So I'm gonna pull that up on Wikipedia. I mean, obviously you can look this up for yourself, but you need. This is me explaining it to you, so you sort of understand. So you'll see different kinds of mics, different kinds of pickups, different kinds of different things. There we go. Microphone, polar pattern. What is all this? All right. It's loading. Polar patterns mean how sensitive a mic is in a given direction. You have what are known as omnidirectional mics, where I could stand absolutely anywhere and it'll pick me up exactly the same. Obviously, the closer you are, the better it'll pick you up. Your voice. You have bidirectional microphones, which pick up from the front and the back with roughly equal sensitivity. Obviously, this is not one of those. What I have is known as a cardioid mic. Now, the point of these patterns, they represent a sort of bubble around the head of the speaker, and the height of the bubble is the sensitivity of the microphone in that direction. So it's a bit confusing to people who are like, oh, what's this little diagram? What's this graph and what does it mean? People don't think about it. So what that means is, let's see, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Here we go. Zoom in. Oop, please. Oh, Jesus, that's not what I wanted. All right, that's better. So, here we go. So that what you would imagine right now is, is that the head of the microphone, which is what I'm talking to the head of the microphone right now, is the center circle of that graph over here, and it's aiming forward. So the most sensitive point of the microphone is the front, and it gets less sensitive as I move to the side, which is what I'm doing right now. So if I'm talking from the side right here, you'll notice how my voice dims out. I'll come forward back to the front of this mic, and it's more sensitive. I'll walk to the other side. So it's a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional bubble around the microphone. And so it sort of annoys me when you see singers on stage going and singing like this. It's not supposed. It's pointing upwards. It's trying to pick up sound from like over there when your voice is coming from here. So you got to aim the microphone at your mouth. Obviously, there are a lot of different kinds of microphones. Some have, and cardioid is the most common, one of the most common. Cardioid and omnidirectional. The others are more suited for what they call for like studio recording work. And then you have shotgun mics, which are used in movies and stuff to pick up people from really far away because they're really sensitive in one direction and a lot less sensitive in other directions, etc., etc. That's what polar patterns are. Pattern itself is not so important. It's just useful to know. If you're looking at microphones, you need to know where they pick up sound from and like how to use it. So you on stage, you wouldn't want to use a super cardioid microphone because it picks up a little bit from the rear side of the microphone, and behind the microphone is usually a speaker that you use to hear yourself. So you don't want that. On stage, you use a cardioid microphone. Inside a studio, you can use whatever microphone, absolutely any microphone you want. So bidirectional microphones are used pretty often for recording like harmonies, people singing from different sides, the same thing. And it's very interesting that way. What's the next thing? Any questions? I hope I've been making sense so far. This is really tricky, I'll be honest. I'm not used to speaking to a computer screen. So I'll pause for a second. I'll wait for any questions. I hope everyone has followed. Send it on the WhatsApp group or on the chat. I'll just keep my next point ready. So I hope everyone understood why microphone cables are different from guitar cables and why you don't want to mix the two because of the way sound is, because of the way signals are sent across it to reject noise and to make it sound cleaner. So let's see. All right, so now to the, I guess I'm not getting questions right now. Oops. All right, so to the most important part of this, which is how sound is recorded and how I approach mixing. So I'll be talking about this for the most part. Mixing means essentially baking a cake. I'm not even joking. That's sort of the most excellent analogy here. So the best cakes or the best foods are are made with the right arrangement of ingredients in the right, not necessarily in the right order. They can be in any order, but well, you have a certain priority of things that are ordered. But a cake is a mixture, and once it's made, it can't be undone. Although there's a small change in modern technology, you can go back to the source and to the material that was recorded and re-record it or remix it in a different way, so that it sounds different. But I think I'm sort of an old soul, you could say, that everything we do today is built on how people recorded in the 60s and 70s when it all started. So that's how you should always approach it, with the old ideologies in mind, and then use new tools to make better things out of it, because what you do now would not be possible. Oh yes, that's actually a really good question. Condenser mics. I should probably reiterate, there's a bit of a lag between when I see your comment and when I speak. It'll be up to a minute. I'm sorry, can't fix that. So Adiniru has asked, what is the nature of condenser mics? A condenser mic essentially requires power to work. It will not work without power supplied to it. It's essentially a powered mic versus an unpowered mic, and it's the recording element, the physical device that records is a different is basically a different physical device. If any of you have ever taken apart a speaker and seen the driver that vibrates and makes the sound, you have sorry, I'm totally rushing ahead of myself. So you have condenser mics and you have dynamic mics, which are the most common. You have plenty of other mics. I've got one of them here which I built, and you have these things called ribbon mics, you have contact microphones, you have so many different kinds, but the most common are condenser and dynamic. I'm speaking into a dynamic mic, which is literally the exact opposite of a speaker. In a speaker, there is a magnet and a coil of wire. You send a vibrating signal into that electrical signal into that wire. It makes the speaker vibrate and produce a sound outwards. You actually could reverse that by taking the speaker, connecting the wires to a recording device, and yell into the speaker, and it will actually pick up something because your voice is making the wires vibrate. So that is exactly what this is, except it's optimized for recording. So that's what most dynamic mics are, and that's why they're very resilient. You can throw them around, you can step on them and stuff, and they'll last. Dynamic mic is designed for lasting, and it's very simple. It has no active circuitry inside. It has nothing to really break unless you break the device itself. A condenser mic has an electrical element inside which will not give out a signal unless there is a sort of a primer, and the primer is electrical power, which is given through this thing called phantom power, available on most mixers and recording devices. I've got it on mine as well. That's an electrical thing. I can talk about electrical stuff separately if you all want to message me about that, as I'm an electrical engineer. But phantom power is also one of those things where less is more, and it's a really cool way of supplying power without extra power wires. And so you'd have an extra charging cable and an extra mic power cable. A condenser mic requires electricity, and that's what you'll normally use in studios. Because they're extremely powerful, extremely sensitive, you'll get tones and quality that you cannot get with a dynamic mic, but they're also fragile. You don't want to drop a you don't want to drop a condenser mic, especially when it's on, because the sound of that will be picked up really, really strong. It can cause damage. Not that it would. They're usually quite resilient as well, but you just don't want to risk it. And that's why if anyone says drop the mic, don't ever drop the mic. It's not what it's meant for. It causes problems. I hope I answered that question. So condenser mic is just a brand of mic that is a style of mic that requires power, and it's used in different settings because of its nature. Unless you know what you're doing, you don't want to use a condenser mic on stage, because you have to power it, and because they're fragile and they're very sensitive. So you'll have problems with feedback. And that's also another thing. Feedback is something that I'll get to in a minute. I think my recording software is not working, so I won't be able to show you a couple of things that I was planning to, and I don't know why that is, but I'm going to try one last time. There we go. Alright. Good. Okay, so that's starting, hopefully. What was I going to say? Yes. Oh, good, it's working. So I'm going to just select my audio device. Thank goodness for that. Later. Yes. Oh, now I know what the problem is. Okay, I'll fix that. I know what to do now. I'm so sorry. I hope I answered your question. Give me 1 minute while I just restart this. I know what to do. It's a good thing I'm a tech person. Has everyone followed so far? I'll wait a few seconds for the reply. And all right. Yes. All right. So one of the reasons I asked y'all to use Reaper is because it's free, but it's also a paid program. But they don't cripple your program for not paying. It's really cheap. So I fully intend to pay the full price of it when I have the money, but I don't have the money right now. So I'm just using it to learn and to teach others and to teach myself. It's really convenient. So Reaper is just a recording software. All of the terminology that you hear about in recording is based off of how they started in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And as I was saying, you want to approach it with that mindset of of understanding how the sounds mixed work together. So back in the day, they didn't have the option of, oh, let's say I record this now. Oh, I made a mistake when I spoke. Or I made a mistake when I sang. I'll just cancel it and go back. They had usually one chance. It's if they recorded it, if they sang, I'm on the top of the world looking down on creation, and it sounded bad. It sounded bad, and there was no coming back from that. So that's why they have to be very, very selective. It was recorded to stuff like magnetic tape or recorded to vinyl, and rewriting vinyl or re-recording to magnetic tape is super, super difficult, at least at the time. And so you had to be good to start off with, for people to take note of you, and then you have to be good enough to record things and get it right in the studio. So if you listen to old recordings of the Beatles, of stuff like Pink Floyd and all, you'll hear small artifacts, you'll hear small mistakes, and they kept those. It keeps an authenticity to it, which I feel is really important. Whereas today, nowadays, every recording is just way too perfect. Everyone's done it perfectly right, perfect every time, and you have things to correct. Like you can even correct your pitch if you go off pitch. Things like autotune. So with that being said, okay, I will give a little background on myself. A lot of this is self-taught, which I do the sound now at a small bar nearby in Bandra, and I've been told so far that I've been doing a really good job compared to other people, and I'm glad for that. What I do is I think of my years as of playing Western classical music. I used to play in I still play in orchestras for quite a while. And the thing about orchestras is that's where all modern music, and Western classical music is where all modern Western music has arisen from. Not all, most popular Western music has arisen from folk songs and from Western classical. And the thing about that is that in order for Western classical to sound right, it has to be balanced. One set of instruments can't be louder or softer than the other, except where it's necessary for something to shine out. And so I'm going to digress a little bit. Here's the thing. Some of y'all may have been to see an orchestral show and be wondering, what's that guy doing up in front of the stage waving his hands? Is he really needed to be there? And the truth is, he doesn't really need to be there. He's just a sort of a guide. If we were perfect machines, humans would be able to sit in a group, they'd look at each other, they'd look at the music in front of them ready to read. If we were machines, we could just look at each other, synchronize our clocks, and we'd all play together. But the problem is, humans are not perfect, and everyone's heartbeat is different. No one is going to be perfectly in time with each other, except in a small group, which is why even small groups have to practice together to be perfectly together with each other. And so what a conductor does, at the very basic gives us a point of reference to latch onto. He is the beat, and we follow his beat, and that way we are all together. The second job of a conductor is to balance the music. So obviously he is there to help us read the music that the composer has written, but how do we perform it? He is there to tell us, oh, you guys, you're being too loud. We can't hear the violins, or you trumpets at the back, you're being too loud, we can't hear the flutes. He is the original sound engineer, because what he hears is what goes out to the rest of the audience behind him, everyone listening. And if he doesn't know his job, which is a pretty difficult job, then everything that goes out sounds wrong. And that is how I approach mixing. Everything has its place in the shall we say in the spectrum of sound, and if you're lucky like me to have that experience of balancing yourself in a group, for example, that is how it should be done. And then there are places, it's a general rule, obviously you can go and do whatever you want for different genres, but that rule holds true for 99.9% of music, of popular music. You should be able to hear everything that's there. So you think about a painting, every color has its place, and every stroke of the brush, if it's not put in correctly, it'll cover up something else, or if it's in the wrong place, the colors won't blend correctly. Like if you want to make a yellow shade of just the right color, you have to put the right amount of you need to put the right amount of red, the right amount of green, just perfectly right, or else you won't get that shade of yellow. And the question is, do you know what a good yellow sounds like? Have you had looks like? Have you had enough practice of looking at what yellow is? So that's one of the things that when you if you don't understand where it comes from, and don't expose yourself to enough of different things, you won't understand what you're listening for and how to make what you're listening for. So I'm not a professional producer. I've recorded a few of my own things. I've tried recording a few other things, but I've not been trained in this. But the same rules apply no matter what. The idea that I use is less is more. And one rule that any good mixing or recording engineer will tell you, I think this is working now, somewhat. Yes. All right. Perfect. All right. So, what you are looking at here is a meter showing how loud my voice is. I don't know. I hope it's in synchronization that you can see. Boom. All right. And what you don't want is what just happened here. Oh, sorry. 1 second. Where is that thing? Dang it. I'm so sorry. Themes. There we go. Yeah. So this is a bit more. Okay. This is what I'm used to. It's the new version. All right. So, okay. You can see that little red dot over there is what you don't want. You don't want it to go too loud, because if you're recording something like an electric guitar, that means your sound is going to get sort of crushed off. It's too loud for the meter to handle. And when you listen to it later, you will hear artifacts and buzzing that's not supposed to be there, because your signal was coming in, they'll say too hot, too loud. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it down very slightly, and you'll hear my voice. You will actually hear my voice go down slightly softer, so you'll have to listen more clearly. But I'm going to turn it up again in a second. So I'm just doing that. Okay, there you go. And now it's back to the original level. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about, for example, I'm going to plug my microphones, because I build a contact microphone. It's called a piezoelectric microphone. And, if you have an instrument that you want to install it on. All right. All right. I hope you all heard that. I'm just tapping the thing. So what it is a microphone that taps, that attaches to a surface. If I hold it up, I could hold this thing up in the air. Oh, see, I can't see myself, so I don't know what I'm doing. All right, here. So yeah, I think y'all should be able to see that. I've just got a piece of paper covering the adhesive, the sticky side. So this is a contact microphone of my own design. Obviously, not completely my design. I followed someone else's directions online and then made my own modifications. But I can attach this to pretty much any surface. I could make it and make it into a percussion instrument, for example. I could attach this to almost any acoustic instrument and make it electrified, basically. And I'm going to demonstrate a little bit two things about it. So I have two of them here. One of them is connected through another electrical circuit of my own design, which I'll show you in a second. As you can see, it's just a little disc. And what happens is this little disc, it generates an electrical signal when it bends. So I'm going to tap it. You'll notice that it's making a very, very tiny sound, because it's just flexing. It's just bending in the air, and the energy from my finger is not actually bending the pickup. But if I hold it like so, it'll be a bit louder. I'll actually have to turn up the sensitivity for this. All right. There we go. Is that working? There you go. So now it's more sensitive. You'll hear it being picked up. And if I attach it to the table and start hitting the table, you will start hearing sounds getting picked up. And the difference with this and the other one that I have is that the second one, which I've put over here, is passing through what's known as a preamplifier. So this is something which is more pertinent to musicians who have already performed, or sound engineers. When someone comes into a music performance with with a, let's say, a violin or a ukulele, you plug it in and it sounds like twink 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 twink. It's like super very shrill, very annoying to listen to. I've experienced that a lot, and it, like, even if the person is playing really well, the sound of the instrument is as though a beginner is playing it very shrill, very screechy, and it shouldn't be like that. It's basically an artifact of this kind of microphone, or contact microphone, which does not electrically match the recording interface. So it's what's known as an impedance mismatch, and what happens is that the sound quality just drops to nothing because the low frequencies are just cut out. So what I've done is I've put a electrical circuit in between the contact microphone and the recording device, which acts as a DI box. People like musicians will be familiar with the DI box, or also what's known as a buffer. I'll just show it really quickly. Here we go. So this is the second contact microphone, and it's running through this little box which has a circuit inside. I hope you can see it. Yeah, hold on. Alright. Everyone alright? Just give me a quick heads up so I know what's happening. Like I said, there's a bit of a delay, so I'm just going to take 5 seconds and make sure I'm ready on my next my next point. And you guys can hear my hostel mates talking in the background. Sorry about that. Alright, oh shoot, Jesus. Gravity is not my friend today. Alright. So using this, for an example. Oh, and by the way, I braided that wire myself. So let's say I'm going to start talking a little bit about what happens as we record. So as you can see, I was talking about this meter. When you're recording, there's this thing known as gain staging in the sound talk. What gain means is the sensitivity of the microphone. And the interesting thing about how powerful my mic is that the sensitivity is at 0 and you're still hearing like a really loud sound. So that's how sensitive it is. I literally cannot raise the sensitivity anymore. It'll start clipping. It'll start peaking, making a sound. Give me 1 second. I just need a sip of water because I've been talking straight for 40 minutes. Hold on. Alright, that's a lot better. Sorry about that. You'll notice my voice is a bit better as well now. Alright. So this is the recording interface, and let's say I wanted to record what I'm talking about right now. So all I have to do is in most recording softwares, there's this thing known as arming the track, as in keeping it ready for recording. It's sort of like arming a grenade. The grenade won't go off unless you arm it by pulling the pin. And so this is what that does. If you don't arm it, it won't record. Then you just speak into your microphone, whatever you're doing. Like if you have it on your computer right now, like I suggested, all you have to do is press record and it'll start recording into your computer. Ooh, look at that. That's what my voice looks like. Let it record a few more seconds and stop. Yes, I want to save it just for now. All right. So normally you'd want to say, oh, that's, Anand's voice. Right there, so it'll record myself there. And if you zoom in, let's zoom into here, for example. Let's zoom into right here. What am I looking at? I'm looking at my voice. That is my voice, and it's just variations in the air pressure from normal. That's what my voice looks like. That's what your voice looks like, And here's an interesting thing. So I'm going to put I'm going to move away from this microphone. I'm going to put my contact microphone on my throat where my voice box is, and you tell me if you hear the difference. All right, hold on. Here goes. This is what my voice sounds like coming out of my mouth. But when I first speak, when the voice is produced in my voice box, it sounds like this. It sounds like this. There we go. I'm gonna just raise the sensitivity a bit. Okay. This is what human voice. This is what human voices sound like. It's just super weird. Okay, so that is what human voices sort of start out as. Oops. That is what human voices sort of sound like right out of the box when your voice is being produced. It was something that I found really interesting. Your voice is produced all the way down here, and it's like super weird and sort of ugly if you think about it. But then as it goes through your mouth and comes out, you get language, you get pitches, you get different sounds and consonants and vowels, all shaped in your head. And so that's really kind of interesting, I thought. Another thing about how we perceive sound is that because low frequencies are because low frequencies spread out so easily, as I was mentioning, when you're talking to someone, they'll hear a higher pitched version of your voice than you will. And also partly because the sound of your own voice conducts through the bone of your body right into your ears, as well as what you hear from your mouth. So you hear, as a human, a slightly lower pitched version of yourself than everyone else does. And that's one of the reasons why people who hear themselves recorded sometimes never get the hang of it, because I don't sound like that when I listen to myself in my ears versus when I hear the recording of myself. How do I sound so different? Because the microphone or someone else's ears doesn't pick up the low frequencies that are transmitted through your own body. All right, good to see so far. And that was just an interesting aside, which I found, which helps you understand about if this is how your own voice sounds. How does a guitar sound? How does a timpani sound? How does a xylophone? How does a violin sound? The same principle applies. If a violinist is playing a violin, they'll be playing right there. Some of the vibrations of the violin is transferred right through their chin into their head. They'll be hearing the sounds of the violin right next to them. But when you put a mic further away, it'll just pick up the screechiness. So you have to put a mic closer to pick up the natural sound of the violin. Alright, so we're going to talk a little bit about effects here. It's going to be a bit tricky because I wanted to be able to demonstrate, but I'm going to give you something that you can do to practice on your own. Alright, so the first effect I went to talk about gain before I forget. So gain staging is nothing more than remembering every part of your recording has this sort of recording level associated with it, and so it can go louder and softer as you record, and so you've always got to be on top of that and not let it go too loud. And that's what a good recording engineer does, is each when he records it, he says, it shouldn't be too sensitive, and then when he puts, let's say, an effect on it, he's like, let's not turn that effect too loud as it'll go too loud, let's make it not too soft, otherwise we'll get noise. And that's something that's very important. So one other term that's good for sound engineers to know is a noise floor. So if I stop talking for the next 5 seconds, you will hear noise. You'll hear the background noise of my room. You'll hear the background. You'll hear essentially what is background noise. And that is the noise floor. That is the bare minimum that I can record, and I can't go quieter than this because of technical reasons. If I was recording in a soundproof room with a central AC and with really high quality microphones and standing really close, I would be able to have a noise floor that is much, much lower. I would have almost absolute silence. And the interesting thing about analog, the old way of recording, versus digital recording into your computer, is that analog recordings, tapes and vinyl, and analog magnetic tapes, is that the so-called noise floor that you had to work with was the was the tape itself. There's a random magnetic field on a tape before you record to it, and so you can't record anything that's quieter than the existing magnetic field. When you record a vinyl, it's got microscopic roughness that you can't physically see, but the recording device will detect it, and so you can't record something that is quieter than the natural roughness of the physical vinyl. And that is where digital shines, because when you have a digital file that is zero everywhere, it's literally truly digital zero, and you have a noise floor that doesn't exist. It's nothing. So you can record something that is unbelievably soft and then record something that is unbelievably loud in the same recording, which is really cool, and something that people take for granted in this day and age. Everything is just loud. There's no such thing as a quiet recording in pop music. There's no what they call dynamics. There's no softness and loudness invariance in the music that gives a lot of emotion. It's just everything loud. And y'all can look up this thing called the loudness wars, which have been a problem for a while now in recording. Again, like I said, I'm sort of traditional. I like things to be soft and be loud, and you'll hear it in old recordings, anything made in the 90s and before. I guess 80s and before the rise of computers, you'll notice that people had to control their volumes. So we talked about gain, we talked about, and that's, again, gain staging was super important in the analog days because you couldn't go too loud. Small trivia, when recording vinyl, you literally could not have super heavy bass and heavy vibrations because because you had a physically limited amount of space on the device to record the sound. So you would literally on a vinyl, if you zoom in with a microscope, you'll see these vibrations which are on my screen. You'd see them etched into the disc, and if I tried to play a bass drum really loud, it would cut across it. If it was kept that loud, it would cut across from one groove to the next, because they're so super close. So that is unbelievably cool how they managed to make really good sounding recordings with that physical limitation that you actually couldn't have super loud sounds on vinyl. And it's a physics thing. This is just like super cool engineering. Now the thing about EQ that you'll want to understand is this thing called I'm going to talk about a quick mathematical thing called a Fourier transform, because it's sort of important. It's how we perceive sound. It's literally how we separate sound into its constituent parts. This is what computers do. Obviously, our brains are wired to do it naturally. But I'm just going to show a picture. You don't have to learn the maths about it. It's just going to be a picture really quick. There we go. All right, here it is. It's an animation. I hope you all can see it. And if you want, you can go to the Wikipedia page for it. But it's just the understanding that the physical wave that you were looking at just now is made up of constituent parts, as you can see. Sorry. I'll just let it loop through one more time. All right. So this is what you see when you're looking at a graphic equalizer, or when you're trying to analyze music. You are looking at what you're hearing. All right. So the red line, that red graph, is the graph of pressure variations as they move past the microphone, or as they move past your ears. You are perceiving those that red line of pressure variations, but your brain does this. It takes it apart, spreads them out, and basically the wave that you're listening to is a sum frequency of all of those little sub frequencies added together. And because your computer does the maths of it, once the math is done, you can actually add and subtract, and that is what an EQ does, or equalization. You are equalizing, you are adding stuff that you want, and you're removing stuff that you don't need to make everything sort of equal and sound right. That's what EQ, equalization, is. I'm going to just put that on here. You won't be able to hear the playback from my computer, but I'll just show you an example of what. Oop, don't crash on me now. I didn't even do anything. All right, good. So it's just loading that. So this is the built-in equalizer for this thing. Oop, no, sorry. And that's the one. All right. So you will see in a moment. All right. Why is this not on? All right, here we go. All right, so you can see sort of a line moving over there. Hopefully it's in time with my voice. I'm just gonna slow it down a bit. All right, so hopefully this line is in time with my voice, and if I make different sounds, you'll see how the frequencies change. Oh, right. I'm so sorry. So if you'll have a moment right now, can you download on your phones this app called Spectroid? Spectroid. Spectroid. I think it's a small program. You can take a few minutes to download it and make random sounds at yourselves. Open it on your phone and you hold it next to your mouth and look at the shapes and the colors of the sound that come out. It's just a way of visualizing what your voice sounds like. So let me just turn that off for a second. Whoops. Whoa, that's weird. That's better. All right. I'll just type the name of this thing. Spectroid. I would I'll keep talking while I'm downloading it, but I recommend you download it. It's an Android app, and it'll just help you understand hopefully understand what I'm aiming for here. There we go. Is it back? And yeah, there you go. Should get the link in the chat. And one cool thing is, if you've played Guitar Hero, that cool video game, they had an extension for a microphone, and the microphone would tell what notes you were singing by doing this Fourier transform, by detecting the pitch, the spectral or the spectrum, you could say, of your own voice and matching it to what they've recorded for the song. And that's pretty impressive. That's pretty cool, I feel. I felt. So if you have it on your phone, you can make sounds like the beatboxing sounds like. There's book, there's I someone told me how to do this and I've forgotten actually. What I remember is book and chicken. So that has book and chick. This is what I do, just to kind of get the idea. I can't actually beatbox. It's just ways to get the understanding and see where the sounds are. So you have to kind of push it out. You can do that into your phone microphone and see where it lights up on the spectrum, you could say. And then book, you'll see that's in a different spot. Then so you can that was me going up and down in pitch, and you'll see that on your phone if it works. I find these simple things really, really cool, because if you don't understand the basics of it, then you'll sort of hold on. Yeah, so if you don't understand these simple basics, then you won't really appreciate how to apply them in big things. Let's see, did I speak about how I approach mixing? Yeah, I as I mentioned, I talked about how I approach mixing is that everything has its place. What you do with EQ is that if something has too much, this is really difficult because I was planning to do this with sort of a demonstration, and unfortunately there's no way for you to hear what I'm doing. So what I want you all to do is, if you have a audio file in your computer, what you'll do is, in my case, I take this song, for example. I'll say one of my favorite songs to listen to is this thing called The Basement. It's got a lot of different frequencies. It's got a lot of different instruments, and I can just click and drag it into the software. I shall delete my own voice from there, and I can zoom in and zoom out and whatnot. So 1 second. Yeah. So if I was listening to this would be a song, and what I can do is I'll add an effect to it, like so. If I was doing like a proper audio podcast or something, I could really go in depth with this. This would be really nice. But instead, what I'll do is I'll add this thing called rear EQ, All right, so I'm just going to make it a bit soft here. Hold on. All right, so if I mute it, it's going to stop playing. Yeah, see, if I make that, it's going to stop playing. So I'm just going to play it over here. All right, so I hope you all can see the sound of the video here. You all can see what it's looking like. Hold on. Yeah. Ah, there's something that's really important. Spectral. This is going to take a second. Give me a second. This is going to take a moment. All right, so if you all were able to download the app and look at it by any chance, you all would have noticed that on one half you have a representation of those component frequencies, the Fourier transform, the low pitch and the high pitch, and using an EQ you can adjust those. And below that is a sort of a 2D photograph of it. So as the frequencies change, you will see, as the physical the 2D, as that line changes, you'll see that it's being reflected in the graph below as it scrolls, and that's what a spectrogram is, which is kind of cool. That's something for another video, which is like super interesting, or another like a real life workshop. So, all right, so is there any way I can listen to this without? All right, perfect. So there we go. So now I can make this nice and loud without having to hear it, because I'm just giving an example of what you can do. If I wanted to, cut out something that wasn't nice, I would cut out that frequency right there, and you'll see that the bright yellow line dips down a little bit exactly over there, and I can sort of choose what I want to take out if I know what I'm doing. You have to listen to these things. And one thing you could say for people who are into recording and mixing, when you are boosting something in the EQ, you want to boost wide. You want to increase the thing that you like, but everything around that thing is supporting that thing. So you typically want to boost everything along with it, and not by much, just a little bit. I've boosted way too much over here. So if I was listening to this, I would be, oh, that's a bit too strong. I would only increase it by that much. But if there's something that you don't like, if there's something like acoustic feedback, like if your mic is too close to your speakers and you want to knock out that thing only, you cut very thin, and it's done by this control called the bandwidth. So bandwidth means how many frequencies are caught in that net. How much am I boosting? How much am I cutting? Right? So if I'm boosting something really high, if I want to boost something, I want to use a high bandwidth. I want to catch all of that stuff with me, and I want to boost everything that around the thing that I like. It catches everything in a wide net. If something is really annoying me in the drums, for example, I don't like the tinniness, like twing twing of the toms or something, then I'll go to something else and I'll say, oh, that's really annoying me. I'm going to get like a really narrow bandwidth, what's a small bandwidth, and I'm going to say, is that here, is that here, somewhere else? This is something you have to develop by ear. You've got to listen to it, and you've got to sort of feel for it, and this unfortunately is something you can't just do it anyhow. You've got to have a bit of practice listening for it. You can do this at home actually. So if you have a song that you like to listen to, start boosting, put on this EQ thing, and boost the thing that you just boost randomly, cut randomly, just kind of get a feel for it. All right, so there are three controls for an EQ. One is what frequency you are trying to increase or decrease, the frequency, which is obviously self-explanatory. Then you have, oops, sorry. No, I didn't want that. There we go. And 3. All right. Okay, so you have the frequency you want to cut or boost. You have how much you want to increase it or decrease it by, which is the gain. This is actually something that's sort of complex, and I'll try and get into that at another time. The dB or decibel, it's not as straightforward as people think. It's what's known as a logarithmic scale, and I'm not going to do this. It's just really annoying. And finally, you have the bandwidth, which is how wide the net is. So for people who are trying to adjust sounds, if you like something, you cast a wide net and boost everything that you around what you like as well as what you like. And if you're trying to cut something, you have to train your ears to find that thing that you don't like and cut only that out. And that takes a bit of practice. That's basically what equalization is. Sorry if I took a bit long on it. And again, this is sort of a new thing for me, but I hope I made sense. Just send a message on the chat again, say you weren't making sense, just let me know, and I'll try and address your question. So now I'm going to pause this. I'm going to add reverb. Now reverb is sort of self-explanatory. If you're sitting alone in your room right now, take out your headphones for 5 seconds, clap, and listen to the echo of the room. So I'll count to 10 seconds, and you can do that. Clap and feel the echo of the room. I'm listening to mine, obviously, because I already know what it sounds like. But that is reverberation. It's pretty self-explanatory, and that is essentially what you'll get. These are that's too loud. That is essentially what you'll get in. So I'm going to add an echo here. So this is not. Remove. This is not a commercially available sorry. Commercially available reverberation. So I apologize because I don't have the money to buy a reverb plugin. But basically what this means is what is the size of the room that you're in. So if it's a big room, it'll take a while for the sound from your hands to reach the far walls and return back. So you have the reverberation of a large room. If it's your bedroom, if it's like my hostel room, it'll come back really, really quick. It'll be really fast, and the sound will reflect back and forth a couple of times, and it's gone. It's really, really fast, and there's it's all hard surfaces, so it takes a second. If you were sitting in a room which was small but it had soft curtains on every wall, you wouldn't get much reverb. You might not get any reverb at all. And that's typically what you want when you're recording, is that you want you want nothing, because then you can add it later on in the computer. And and the way that people did this in the old days before they had computer technology is they would record something as cleanly as possible in the recording room, which was known as a dead room, because they wanted perfectly clean, no reverb, no echoes, no nothing, utterly nothing in that room. And when they wanted to add a reverberation, they would take that sound that they recorded, play it back through a speaker, but the speaker would be placed in a room with the reverberation that they wanted. So if they wanted the echoes of and grandeur of a church, they would either find a room or a church itself with that atmosphere and play the sound back through a speaker and re-record it, and then layer that reverberation on top of what was already recorded. And the thing is, if they did it wrong, the person doing it would have to know exactly what they were doing so that it didn't overpower so that the recorded reverb did not overpower the original recording. And that just blows my mind again, because would a person have done it without experimenting with the amount of stuff that they did, the things that we take for granted. Now we can just say, oh, I don't like that, let's cut it down. I like that, let's raise it up, So again, don't ever take it for granted what you can do right now. That's what reverb is. It's that simple. You have these little controls known as pre-delay and how long it should go on, how much it should be damp. Don't worry about that. But they're pretty self-explanatory. Room size will emulate a bigger room. Dampening will simulate if there are soft surfaces everywhere. Stereo width is a bit tricky to explain. Don't worry about it. It's just the difference between left and right, appearances of left and right. Alright, so that's how reverb. Now the most difficult one to explain, which is compression. Give me a second. Actually, no, I don't need that. I can use it with, this will make more sense. This will actually make a little bit more sense. Here we go. Add a track. And why is it not? Oh, monitor. Okay, I need to turn that off. I'm going to turn this off for a second, and I need to add it here. That's my mistake. I'm still getting used to this. Here we go. So I'm going to add on a compressor, and you can see the little thing over there. All right. Is everyone following? Okay, I'm going to just check in one more time. I apologize. Just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. I hope y'all are not getting bored. I'm so sorry. But I hope y'all are learning something from this. I'll take a second and wait. I apologize if I'm being a bit disconnected. I usually work better if people are asking me questions. So it's a bit tricky to keep my thoughts in order. I hope I have not been too distracted and too weird. All right. I guess the question of the day is, am I wearing pants? Yes, I'm wearing pants. I'm not that confident. And plus I'm in a hostel room, so I can't really sharing room, so I can't really go around. All right, so back to compression, the most difficult one to explain. What compression does at its very basic thing is that it makes things that are too loud softer and things that are too soft a little bit louder. How it does this, I will try and explain. So let's say you can see my voice on the screen. I hope you can see my mouse. That is what my voice looks like. Let's say I start talking on it, or if I'm beatboxing, I go. And if I was on a big PA speaker, they might say, "Oh, that's way too loud. We need your boom, boom, boom to be a little bit softer." So what I would do is I would move the threshold. Oops, yeah, that's correct. Up to about here, for example. And what would happen is, what would happen is any sound that went above that threshold would be pushed down. So what happens is when you set the threshold of a compressor, that's the first control you learn. When you set the threshold of the compressor, anything that is below the threshold is unaffected. Anything that is above the threshold does get affected. So if you look at it right now, you'll see the original audio, which is the dim yellow line, and the audio that you would actually hear, which is the bright yellow line. And you can see that if I'm talking softly, it doesn't really affect anything. They're roughly about the same. But once I start talking really, really loudly, it starts cutting off and chopping off the top of those loud waveforms. And that's what a compressor does. Something that's too loud, it tries to act immediately to push it down. And how does it make soft things louder? The thing is, once you've made something that's very loud softer, you can then increase the overall volume. So what was softer is now louder in comparison to what it was, and what was loud is now obviously softer. So maybe that wasn't too hard to explain, but it's something that's taken for granted, and something that's very difficult to use because you have to really train your ears to hear the difference. The best compression is in like live shows and acoustic shows. It's not used as much. Shall we say, it's not used as transparently in EDM. It's not in rock music and all. It's used very intensively in those genres because they need to keep everything at a tolerable volume. But like in something like country music or Western classical, actually you don't want to use a compressor in Western classical because you want to hear what's loud, you want to hear it loud, and what's soft, you want to hear it soft. That's one of the beauties of Western classical, is that the play of the dynamics, the soft being soft, the loud being loud. But let's say you're listening to something on your phone which has a really shitty speaker, or on your shitty headphones. So when it goes really soft, you have to struggle to hear it, and when it starts going loud, it just kind of booms out, and that's when you would use a compressor. Unfortunately, it's not always possible, but you would set the threshold to be something that to push down the loud, and then the next control you get is what's known as the ratio. Those are the two main ones. The threshold will affect when it turns on. It doesn't do anything below the threshold, and the ratio tells you how much it's compressed. So if I have if I had something that was really loud, I would put a really loud a really high ratio on it. So below the threshold, nothing happens. It's the same signal. It's the same audio that you hear. Above the threshold, something that was at a scale of 10, if it was a 10 above the scale of the threshold, the ratio says it's now 1/4 of that. If you can see the ratio number there, I've said, I want it to be compressed to 1/4 of what it was. So something that went, let's say, 1 centimeter over the meter would now go 1/4 of a centimeter over the threshold meter. That's all that compression does. That's all the ratio does, is it tells you how much you're squeezing it down. The dynamics. Sorry, I should have said the word dynamics earlier. So dynamics is how loud and how soft something is. And so a compressor, the full name is a dynamic range compressor. Something that is very soft and very loud, like classical music, has high dynamic range. Something that is super loud all the time, like Sweet Child of Mine, has low dynamic range, and EDM has like no dynamic range. It's the same volume the entire time, and because it's super compressed. The last thing that you have is the output gain, because once you've made something that's very loud softer, everything it becomes softer, and you want to raise the gain, so that you want to raise the volume so that the soft parts are also loud now, and that's what the output gain or makeup gain does. Well, I guess explaining compression wasn't too hard, as I thought, but it's a tool. I will emphasize this, that compression is a tool that's very difficult to use because most people overdo it, and people who start using it just don't know. People who don't know what it is just don't know what it is. People who start using it just put it on everything, and it messes up your sound. It can cause. I would recommend that you search on YouTube for professionals having demonstrations of compressed sound, and listen with high quality YouTube download and high quality headphones if you can. Listen to the difference in the sound. If you're already a musician, you'll have a head start. If you're not a musician, it'll be difficult to hear the differences. But listen on high quality gear, and you'll hear that something that's compressed just never sounds as pleasant unless that's what you intended to do. So the trick again is less is more, which I said in the beginning, and I said it less times because that means it's more. I think I've covered most of what I wanted to. Yes, that looks like it. And I hope I've been understandable. Questions, please. I'd like it if you can be specific, because that'll really help in directing my thoughts to answer your question rather than trying to explain what's on my mind, because I have a lot of ideas that I want to talk about, which are stuff that's electrically related and stuff that's little related to the lights that I build. I build lights that respond to sound. I build these pickups, which, hey, by the way, you can buy them. Any questions? So I'm watching the chat now for a second. Anyone there? I hope someone is there. I hope I've covered everything. Thank you to Udbhas, Ariniru, I guess it's not showing your name, and Nirali. Awesome, thank you guys for being here. I'm just waiting for a few minutes. I really want to get some questions. It'd be nice to be able to answer something from someone, hopefully before my internet goes out completely. This is At least I can say has been a successful test of the YouTube streaming platform, and I can do this more regularly later. Oh, that's a good point. I didn't think of that. So if you came in a bit later, you'll be behind the actual live stream, which is fine. Good. So I'm still live for a little while. I'll be on for 5-10 minutes more. I think I've covered everything. So I'll wait for questions since other people might be behind on the stream. I think I see what you're saying. Adiniro is asking, how do you balance between amplifying and keeping it compressed enough to sound decent? That is a difficult, actually. Hold on. It's actually somewhat of a difficult question to answer, unfortunately. Let's see. This comes back to what is known as the signal chain from the start of your recording to from the start of the source of the signal where you record the guitar or the voice or whatever to where it enters your computer and what you're doing in your computer. Each of them has a start, a process, and a finish. You would want to do you would want to observe gain staging, which is the common term, which is saying that, hey, don't keep it too loud. This is something you'll have to do by ear, unfortunately. The part of the trick is, again, less is more. Don't keep it too loud at the recording stage, because that will allow you to amplify it more in the adjustment stage. Compression is something that you will have to practice with, and you can't practice compression on tracks on like popular music because it's already been done on them. There isn't really much room to work with. You'd need to test it on your own voice, on your own instrument, and on in stuff that it works best on stuff that is really soft and really loud. I will just say less is more. The trick is, if you can hear the compression, it's too much, and that's what any professional sound engineer will tell you. So it's like they'll say, if you're hearing, obviously depending on the genre of the music, but if the compression is, if you can hear it, it's too much. Yeah, that's basically what I would say. Same thing applies to stuff like autotune. I have no problem with autotune myself, actually, and I love the story of how it was developed. It was actually, autotune, for example, was originally developed as a analysis tool for earthquake frequencies, the frequency of vibration of the earth, and they started applying it to voices, and it's become, it became overused. It still is overused, I feel, but the thing is, if you can hear the autotune, I feel it's too much. Same thing applies to compression. The thing is, it should sound natural. The idea is that compression takes out troublesome peaks in the signal. It doesn't. It makes sure it's not too loud. And the benefit of compression is mostly when there's something that's soft and you want it to be really, really clear. So when you're doing it live, I just have a general rule which I adjust. I have to adjust by ear, but as a general rule, when someone is doing their sound check, for example, I'll tell them to speak normally or to sing at their softest, or just speak or sing normally, and I'll adjust the compression so it just barely starts to engage. You remember I said that compression doesn't do anything to something that's soft. So you tell them to speak softly or speak normally, and you adjust it so it just barely starts to engage, and you just take it off of that. So when they're speaking or singing normally, your compression shouldn't engage. And then you tell them to sing a loud song. And my easy rule of thumb for compression of anything, almost anything, not everything, for anything acoustic like guitar and voice, is 3-to-1 ratio. So everything that goes above that peak is compressed by a factor of 2 to 3. Not only 3, but around 2 is good. And if if it's sounding a bit too much, then say 1.5. But anywhere between 1.5 to 3, it depends on the person. All right, so I hope that answers the question. XLR mics and field recorder. Okay, so Udbas is asking, are XLR mics and field recorders the same? Do different principles apply to them? Technically, they should work in essentially the same way, but they're optimized for well, let's see. They're optimized for different tasks. So a field recorder is designed to record where there may be a lot of noise. So learning how to place it well is kind of difficult, and if I'm not mistaken, something like the Zoom recorders record in stereo, so you want to place it like in the center of what you're recording, and it picks up the left and the right. And let's see, so I don't know, it depends on what issues you're actually having, like are there clicks, are there buzzes, it could be things to do with noise, it might be that you're not using the right cables. It's really hard to say. I'll come back to that in a second. So Adenir is asking, what does amplifier, compressor, and EQ tools do in the mixing software? Phaser and flanger. Okay, so the cool thing about phaser and flanger, they're sort of two sides of the same coin, and what phaser and flanger do are a sort of dynamically adjusting the EQ itself. What I will tell you to do is, I'm going to open repo for a second for this question. I'm going to open, close that. Add the EQ. Okay, so what I want you to do is you open an audio file, any audio file in your recording software. You take any of these adjustment bands, you raise it and lower it as you see fit, I don't know. Well, what you want to do is you want to raise it. So raise that, you'll see a big bump. You're boosting those frequencies in your voice, but you reduce the bandwidth. You're only trying to single out certain frequencies, and then all you have to do, move it back and forth. Wow. So what you'll end up hearing is wow, wow, wow sound going around in the song that you're listening to, or in your voice. If you're listening to your voice with this EQ on and you move this back and forth, you'll hear a wow, 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 wow sound that goes. So as I go up, it goes wah, and as I go down, it goes eow. And that is, I'm literally doing phasing with my voice right now. I am adjusting what frequencies are adjusted and boosted. That's essentially what phasing is. What a phaser plugin does. Phasing in audio is a different effect from a phaser, but I don't know why they, but they have somewhat of the same effect. Like if you have audio that is not perfectly synchronized with each other, you will have artifacts that sound like what a phaser does, and that's where the term comes from. All right, so manually phasing is something that you'll want, and flanging does something again very similar. I don't know the exact technique, so you'll have to look that up, but it does something very, very similar. Flanging and phasing are types of EQ that adjust in time to give that sort of tone. So your flanger and phaser are basically EQ tools and EQ plugins that give you a special effect by adjusting EQ in real time, adjusting it back and forth. Like, it's not just one thing. EQ, you adjust it and it stays there. But if you were looking at an EQ graph of a phaser or a flanger, it would be moving back and forth in real time to based on the parameters that you set. I hope that made sense. Yeah. Oh, so that's based. That's how. Yeah, that's a phaser. I don't think I've missed anything on how they work. Good. Did that make sense? To go back to Udbas, so I need to know what issues you're having before I can say why the issues are happening. And obviously it helps if I can be there, which I can't. But common issues are, check the wire that you're using. If it's a USB connection, try a different USB port. Check on your computer side, check the driver, physically. On computers, the driver is the translation layer between the physical hardware that you're using and how it translates into the computer. So when people say install the right drivers, they're saying literally install the translator for your computer to talk to this hardware device. And so check that you've got the right driver. Can you just, I mean, you can tell me what issue you're having, and I'll try and I'll try and figure it out. If I can't, I'll say I can't figure it out. I think, well, I hope I've made sense to everyone. All right. Oh wait. So just like a little sort of bonus thing that I can do right now is one thing I did. I think I don't know if I probably talked about it. Is that yeah, try not to mix up your. Oh, yeah, I did talk about it, but yeah, try not to mix up your connections, the wires that you use. So guitar wires for guitar, mic wires for mic. It's not advisable to mix up the two for electrical reasons and just for sound quality reasons. All right. Yeah, oh, so Udbas is gonna tell me his problem. So while he's typing it out, I will let's see how my voice sounds. So right now we're going to combine two things. We're going to combine we're going to combine my microphone with my microphone, the physical mic that I'm speaking into, and the contact microphone, and let's see how that changes the sound. Alright, so this is my microphone. This is the this is the vocal microphone. This is my contact microphone. I'm going to raise it up. I'm going to raise the volume a little bit. This is my contact microphone right now. Right now this is super loud and super weird. Right? And the combination of the two should give let's say this is a deeper voice, for example. So I'm personally very proud of how my contact mic has developed. Let's see if this lockdown goes away. Hopefully I will be able to sell them. And those of you who play a violin in particular, violin, viola, cello, string instruments, anything with a resonating box. I've tested it on a sitar, guitar, bass guitar, double bass, a little bit of testing on cajon, but I need more. I've tested it on the metal drums, the what are known as hang drums. And yeah, okay, so I'm seeing Udbas's issue here. Sorry about that. So that's another plug for my pickup. Okay, the first track, record track over that. Oh, okay, so the first track records fine, but when I try to record another track over it, the playback on the headphones while the next track is being recorded has its pitch shifted down. If I'm not mistaken, this will be something to do with what's known as sampling frequency. This is a technical thing. You will go over this if you were in a sound engineering course. But what happens is that your recorder is recording at a really high rate of speed, super fast. It's usually over 40,000 times per second, which is really, so 40 kilohertz, 44.1, 48. Yeah, it's a good interface. It's not an issue. But it's recording super fast, and you have to configure your computer to listen at the same speed, because if your computer is set up at a lower speed, it will record the audio just fine, but it will play back at the lower speed that it was recording at, and so your really high quality recorded sound just ends up being slowed down at the slower speed. So typical common mistakes are that your recording device is recording at 48,000 samples per second, or kilohertz, 48,000 kilohertz, and your computer is recording at 44.1. So you need to either drop the recorder to 44.1, or you need to increase your computer to 48, and then you hopefully shouldn't have a problem. If it's something that's already recorded, you'll have to do something that's known as downsampling or upsampling. So that'll be a bit tricky. So if you want to just re-record with both your sample rates matching, I think that should solve your problem. Tech support. Indians are good at that, right? All right. So I actually will have to cut the live stream in a minute. I got a notice that my internet capacity is going to be reaching its limit. So I hope we have all learned something right now. I'm going to give it about a couple more minutes for any further questions. Actually, bring your questions to the WhatsApp group chat. I'll still answer them. I can record an audio clip on the WhatsApp chat. It'll take less stuff than the live stream. And just send your messages on the WhatsApp chat. Ending the stream in approximately 2 minutes. Cutting it pretty close on my internet. I would have liked to play something for you guys and demonstrate my pickup, but my viola is in Thane while I'm in Bandra, and we can't go there because of the lockdown, so I'm without my viola for the foreseeable future, or at least until this lockdown is ended. This has been an interesting experience for me. Thank you guys for being a part of it. Thank you, Nirali, Ariniru, Udbas, and anyone else who's listening in off the corner. And hope who knows if my hostel mates were listening outside the room. This is Anand Lobo signing off. I'm Oh No It's a Lobo on Instagram. Feel free to share your ideas of how you can improve. And hopefully we'll be able to do this in real life in a while, because this is really difficult without props. Thanks, guys. Signing out.